Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It is once again that time of the week. What time of the week is it? It's that time of the week where we dig underneath the headlines, where we talk about what the mainstream media is not talking about. We focus on issues right here in our backyard, nationally, internationally, and generally call out the establishment on its BS. This is the Hoodrat Strategist radio program. It is a weekly show where we talk about politics, revolution, protest, and resistance. So if you're just joining us, we've got a lot to talk about on today's show. It has been a very eventful week right here in Kalamazoo, particularly when we're talking about local politics and activism. Later on in the show, we're going to be talking to a representative of the American Indian movement to discuss some protests coming up this weekend in Paw Paw over their continued usage of the Arskins name, you know, as their mascot. We're also going to be joined later on by Don Ford, who may in fact be one of the most influential people in the Dem Enter movement that you have never heard of. But first, while I'm still riding solo on the saddle here, I did want to unpack some of the goings-ons from the last couple of days, because there has been a lot. And when we talk about calling out BS on the establishment, well, we've got a lot to talk about when it comes to our local government right here. Oh man. And you know what? Before I really dive into it, I don't think I actually said this at the top of the show, so I'll say it now. The following thoughts, views, and opinions are not necessarily those of 89.1 FM WIDR Kalamazoo or Western Michigan University. So when I start spitting this radical leftist dialectic, you'll know it's not, I don't have the seal of approval of the school. They just provide me a microphone. So I want to talk about something a little bit more obscure, and we're going to definitely talk about an update on what's going on with the homelessness encampment. But a couple things happened at the county commission meeting last night that left people quite irate and disturbed. And I didn't really see much in the local press about this either. I don't know if maybe it got overshadowed by what was going on with the city commission per the homeless issue. But, yeah, pardon me, sorry. But one of the things that happened was there was a very contentious vote that kind of snuck up on everyone. And this is actually straight from an activist friend's Facebook that they shared this. So last night at the county commission meeting, Michael Seals, he's one of the Democratic commissioners on the board, on the county commission, that is. He moved to dismantle, basically cancel out the agency that was acting as the advisory board to deal with poverty and those kind of issues in the county. They were responsible for that $200,000 that everybody's been talking about, you know, as in a couple weeks ago we reported on this, how $200,000 was left unspent that should have been used and devoted towards resources to helping the homeless and the impoverished in the city. And of course that revelation came out right around the same time that the homelessness encampment and protests were starting up. So it was kind of a perfect storm of bureaucratic malfeasance. Well, as we go even further into it, apparently this advisory board no longer exists. So how exactly did this happen? Well, it's the CTAB board, and Michael Seals brought the motion to the floor, and all of the rest of the Republicans also voted to dismantle this board. And the vote that would have swung it in the opposite direction, Stephanie Moore was actually out visiting her daughter in the hospital when this all went down. A lot of local activists have really been crying foul about this. It kind of reeks of not only political opportunism, waiting for that moment to actually do this, but there's actually some backroom drama that goes into this related to the recent primary election. So what essentially happened, Stephanie Moore, a while ago, she encouraged a candidate to run against Michael Seals in the primary. And that particular person, from a story we actually didn't report quite on, at least not extensively on a few weeks ago, where they voted not to reappoint this woman to the board, the woman who was running against Commissioner Seals, and actually interrupted Stephanie Moore in the middle of her talking about this, in the middle of her kind of talking about how it was patently unfair for them to disinclude this person from the board, ostensibly because it seemed like she was being targeted for daring to run against Michael Seals. And she was, Stephanie Moore, that is, was interrupted by a motion to basically close the topic out. So this is actually more or less a follow-up to that. So, apparently his reasoning is that it was an ineffective board in the first place, but it reeks of a lot of pettiness and political revenge. And it really does seem like kind of retaliation against Stephanie Moore for encouraging somebody to go ahead and run against him in the last election. And this whole thing, this idea of dissolving an agency you're not happy with, it doesn't make much sense, especially with everything that's going on right now. What you should do is be trying to constitute that board with people who will be more receptive and can do better work towards dealing with poverty in the city, figuring out where that money needs to go. But dissolving it as a working group is asinine, and it really doesn't make much sense. But that is where we are left with. That is where we are left at right now on that issue, and that $200,000 is now being sent back to the state. Oh, oy vey, what a waste, and really a terrific disappointment. Like I said, this issues involving poverty, homelessness around here, they are being highlighted in a way that they haven't been in a very long time. And this is exactly the opposite kind of move that they should be making. And also, while we're still on the topic of the county commission, that's not all. No, actually, there were some other particularly irritating developments at last night's county commission meeting. All of the Republican Kalamazoo County commissioners voted last night to stop County ID from using the grant money that the program receives from the already received from the Kalamazoo Community Foundation for marketing purposes. And this is from a post by Nelly Fuentes, who is a cosecha organizer and one of the key people who orchestrated the county ID program in the first place. She makes it clear like that this money that's already been awarded the county ID program is a private grant. There were no tax dollars involved. Yet all of the Republican commissioners deemed the program not worthy of using its own grant money for marketing. And that really is a disappointment. But not entirely surprising. What makes sense to me is, unfortunately, we had, it was very clear, the path as far as getting to the county ID. And I don't mean that to say it was easy. By no stretch of the imagination. It took months and months and months and lots of work. But eventually, enough of the Republican county commission candidates got behind the county ID program to make it viable. Now that it actually exists, it's a real program, they seem to be taking actions to make it weaker, to defund it. And not to presume motive here, but this does remind me a lot of how Republicans function at the federal level as well. When they talk about dismantling programs, what they do is first they defund them, they make programs less effective, and then they can turn around and make the case to their constituents that less government is better and we should cede these responsibilities to private interests. Only after the Republican legislators in charge have purposefully weakened those government programs to make a private option seem more appealing. Now, granted, there's probably not going to be any private entity coming along to sell county IDs, so that's not a one-to-one comparison. But it does go to show that even in the aftermath of convincing these commissioners to go forth with the program, there are other ways they can actively and willfully sabotage it. And again, that is very disappointing for everybody who's been involved since the get-go in getting this county ID program put together. Oh, and you know what? While I'm on this friend's post, she does remind everyone that we still don't have a non-cooperation policy with ICE. Now, the county commission, we don't have a non-cooperation policy with ICE from the sheriff's office. Now, if you've been following, both the city and the county commission have voted on resolutions to stop any financial or administrative cooperation with immigration and customs enforcement. And also, basically, to put pressure on Sheriff Fuller to no longer cooperate with the agency and do ICE holds. And what ICE holds are is basically when somebody is arrested, their background is checked, and if they are flagged as somebody that ICE is looking for, Kalamazoo County Jail will hold them until ICE can pick them up and put them to one of their more permanent holding facilities, such as in Battle Creek and GR, at least for a little bit, although some positive efforts have been made up by GR Cosecha to get the county commission to cancel their contract with ICE, and kudos to them. So while Kalamazoo doesn't actually have a contract with ICE, we do still hold individuals on their behalf. So technically under current policy, the county Sheriff Fuller, is choosing to use our tax dollars to hold people for ICE up to 48 hours after their scheduled release. So that's the county commission. Oh, but that's not all. If you've been following the stories that we've been actively following the homelessness encampment downtown as it began as a response to some particularly heinous proposed ordinances that would have essentially criminalized sleeping in the park and made it extremely difficult for our homeless population to find a place to sleep. And, excuse me. Where they are at now, literally, not figuratively, they are now located at Bronson Park yet again. So, what happened last night is that, this was pretty outrageous. The county commission, the city commission had so the homeless folks the protesters brought forth their demands to the city and got it on the agenda for this meeting that happened last night. And the city commissioners refused to hear the demands of the residents experiencing homelessness. What this meant in particular was that when these demands that were, and I'll go through them, getting an investigation started into the gospel mission. Since I've been following this story and been involved with the homeless protests and encampment, the gospel mission, there probably hasn't been a day gone by that I haven't heard somebody bring up the gospel mission in a disparaging light. Whether it's their discrimination against LGBTQ folks, because, they are a church, religious organization. The fact that they have certain rules that are difficult, that, cause undue stress on the homeless population. Married couples are not allowed to sleep together. There's been reports of black mold at the shelter, inadequate food and housing, and not housing, but inadequate room, as it were, especially in the wintertime. And the way that the city more or less views it as a de facto solution to a lot of the homelessness problem, when there are many homeless folks that I've met that say either the structure of the mission is far too exclusionary, or people telling me that the conditions of the mission are literally so bad that they would rather sleep outside. So between last week and this week, the encampment moved down to Cedar Street, which is actually the location of that old fire station down by Papa Pete's and the Blue Dolphin. And they've been camping out there for about a week. However, this compromise is kind of based on two things. It's like kind of a vague agreement from the city to put an action group together to really, tackle the issues that the homeless population is raising. And also to provide visibility to the issue. Now, I would say, it's very transparent what the city's motives for this were. There were people complaining, particularly like many rich white people. Let's call it like it is. About basically having this kind of footprint and presence in the park. Now, from what I've heard from everybody there, in my own eyes, is that the homeless folks had basically built a nice little community down in the tent city. I encourage anybody to go down there, visit, talk to them. They are back in Bronson Park as of today, and I'll get to kind of the reason behind that in just a moment. And with the encampment, they really did a lot of good self-policing too. One of the things that have been brought up, particularly at the first meeting several weeks ago, was a concern about a resurgent drug problem, some crime issues. As was stated by many folks, including Shannon Sykes, who is one of the city commissioners, the homeless encampment basically had a self-policing mechanism. You know, people would watch out for each other and make sure people were not being disruptive, picking up after themselves, and all over the park as well. In fact, the homeless encampment has actually been getting a lot of compliments from workers in the park for helping to pick up and keep it clean. However, in that compromise that was reached about a week ago, they're told to move to this essentially abandoned lot over on Cedar Street. Now, there's a couple of problems with that, and I will lay them out forthwith. That old fire station actually has been closed due to asbestos contamination. About a year back, I was actually at a city meeting over at the Kalamazoo Public Library to talk about the property that the homeless folks are now staying at. And the reason that we could not hold a meeting at the fire station is because it was determined unsafe to actually hold a meeting in. It is closed to, has a lot of asbestos contamination. Windows are broken, and, there's, people who are camping down there risk potential exposure. There's also just a couple of large dumpsters there. Somebody has complained that the porta potty that has been put there not emptied since Friday. This is a long time. I would also add that, the actual area there is certainly less comfortable than the park. There's far less shade, far less grass to actually sit or camp on, so it's mostly concrete. And a lot of the homeless people have actually been complaining that because that particular area is less visible, they've been experiencing more harassment than they were at the park. Particularly cited were people who are, done getting drunk at the bar, coming through and harassing them. There was a report of somebody who actually threw a firecracker at the homeless encampment. And as I'll read a little bit from this article that was posted just earlier today at about 2:30. And talk a little bit about there have been some positives to come out of this, and it seems like the city is actually listening a bit to these folks to a certain extent. So earlier, a working group made up of members of the protest met representatives of various community agencies today at City Hall. It's part of the agreement signed between the City of Kalamazoo and protesters 5 days earlier. And here's a surprise. Even Mary Balkema actually came down and talked to one of the homeless individuals. There's actually a photo on the website of her talking to Stuart Hamilton in relation to the land bank. And for those of you who don't know, Mary Balkema and her family own the Kalamazoo County Land Bank, which owns many of the empty houses here in the city of Kalamazoo. So when we're talking about the fact that we have the resources in the empty houses, one of the stumbling blocks is like a lot of those are owned by the land bank, and whether or not they would actually work with the homeless population is a big question. Although, as much as I've criticized Mary Balkema in the past, I will give her credit for actually going down there to talk to the homeless protesters at the encampment, which is something some of our city officials didn't even bother to do. And I wanted to follow up and talk a little bit more about the actual meeting last night. Unfortunately, I was unable to make it myself, as I was being part of the working class, and I was working, unfortunately. However, as I started out by saying, the city commission meeting was a bit problematic because they shot down the actual proposals and changes that the homeless folks are advocating for. And Shannon Sykes, all power to her, delivered about a 30-minute defense of the protesters and kind of a condemnation of the rest of the city commission for not being willing to listen or even discuss some of the demands of the protesters. However, like I said, there are some good things going on. So let me go through some of those. Excuse me. So one of the things that they demanded... Oh, excuse me. Sorry about that. Well, one of the things that the city has decided to provide is particularly for the protesters with children and families. They have decided to help them out by essentially putting them up in some local motels. And sorry. And they have come back to Bronson Park. And they will continue to be there for the foreseeable future, it sounds like. However, the fact that the homeless protesters and city officials actually met in person today for something like these working meetings is a very positive step. And it's certainly a lot more tangible than a lot of the kind of hand-waving surface-level attempts to deal with homelessness in this city throughout the last few decades. As was pointed out in this article, Shannon Sykes actually went as far back as 2007 to read some articles pointing out the exact same homelessness issues that we are currently dealing with here in 2018. So here's kind of where we're at right now. They're back in Bronson Park. I haven't found out yet if that's for the 30 days or if that is going to continue until some of these other demands are met. But, the work is starting. And we've just got to keep the pressure on city government and city officials, because it does, in fact, seem to be bearing some fruit. I would also like to point out that the homeless encampment at Bronson Park is still always in need of some donations. And if you can, I know they're always in need of water, food. They've made a particular ask for sleeping bags and tents. And, really any way that you can help them out. They've also asked for books. Any way that you think you can help out the homeless encampment, please, make some time, even if it's just to go talk to them. Maybe, bring some coffee or donuts or something like that. But yeah, that's down in Bronson Park, and that'll be continuing on for a while. So, I think it's about time we go to a break. This is the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo. When we come back, we'll be joined by a special guest to talk about some protests coming up this weekend against Paw Paw's racist-ass mascot. This is the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo, your only source for political revolution.
not be apparent, but hunger is a rather prominent issue amongst the student body of Western. The Invisible Need Project is a multifaceted initiative that's aimed to help struggling students. Every 2 weeks, generous people donate their food to the pantry located in the Fawn Student Service buildings or other drop-off locations. All you need to do is grab a reusable bag and grab whatever food you need to help sustain yourself. If anyone's unsure when their next meal will be, or if you have a little extra food you'd be willing to donate, the food pantry is your place. If you're looking to help donate, become a volunteer, or just learn more, call 269-387-4742 or email dosa-inp@wmich.edu for details.
Hi, this is Fred Snyder of the B-52s and the Superions, who were formerly the Del Morons. And every time I'm in Kalamazoo, I tune into WIDR.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. We are back. This is the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo. So we're actually joined by a guest to talk about some protests that are going to be going on this weekend out in Paw Paw. This is Linda Cypret-Kilbourne. Sorry. And she's going to be talking a little bit about what is going on over there in Paw Paw, why there's going to be a protest. First, Linda, if you go ahead, just introduce yourself to the folks at home, let them know who you are and kind of what you're about.
Bonjour, ani neshna. Ajawana nemtikwe dishes nakas. She can dotem. Sports the Kalamazoo River and Donjaba. My name is Southern Thunder Woman. I'm Turtle Clan. I reside in the Albion Marshall area. My English name is Linda Cypret-Kilbourne. First of all, I'm a great-grandmother of a large extended Anishinaabe family. I carry a whole lot of titles that I don't usually discuss, but I am a co-founder of the Michigan Coalition Against Racism in Sports and Media, chairperson of the NASCO movement, I'm an AIM member, and yada, yada, yada. We're going to be out in Paw Paw Sunday, September 9th. We're going to be walking in their parade, voicing our voices against the use of the Redskin name.
So, just for some context, listeners who may not know, so Paw Paw, their school system, still uses the R-Skins mascot, and
correct.
And I believe it's there's still there's a few other schools in Michigan who still have been using that name, although I think a few of them have actually changed in the last couple of years. So could you explain, like, at home, I think a lot of people kind of have a cursory idea of why it's more or less offensive, but could you speak to what's the historical context? Why is this so egregious for somebody who may not understand it that way? Thinks like, oh, it's just tradition or some such thing.
Right. Well, to start with, there's 5 schools still in Michigan using the term. We always refer to it as the R word. It's Camden, Frontier, Saranac, Sandusky, Clinton, and Paw Paw. It's very belittling and derogatory. It's a race-based, just a bad thing to say. It's basically back in the time where they had bounties on Native American people, included children, women, older people, didn't matter. They would go out and basically kill us and skin us. They would skin us from our necks down to our ankles and turn those skins in for a bounty. And then they made bridal chaps and ranges and things like that out of the skins, similar to what Hitler did to the Jewish people with the lampshades. I think they called that lampskins or something like that. So, just to call a Native American person a redskin is very derogatory. We don't run around calling Asian Americans, yellow skins, or Afro Americans black skins, and Hispanic Mexicans, brown skins. So why do you call us redskins and use that term? For some people it's very hurtful. The history that of their family members, were murdered. There was a mass murder in this country, a genocide that took place. And it still goes on today, really. So it's very hurtful, very derogatory for Native children. When you're sitting at these TAP assemblies and watching these teams and sports going on, and they're yelling, skin the Redskins or scalp the Redskins or go Indians or whatever, they're talking about a living, breathing cultural people, traditional people that still are here today and practice our way. And our children hear and see this, and it's not easy for them to watch some of the things that happen at these PEP assemblies and stuff. You can't control what other schools do. I remember back when I was a kid, the opposing school that we played, we put this, I shouldn't say we, but the kids would put together a scarecrow type thing image and burning at a bonfire, and it was killing the Indians. So, that kind of stuff happens sometimes. We had one school that was out there using, we're going to send them back to the Trail of Tears too.
Oof,
so if you know anything about the Trail of Tears, for a Native kid to see something like that is devastating. And the other factor of all this is it's our religion, for lack of better words, our spirituality. These severed Indian heads that they use is, those are our spiritual leaders, the same as a priest, a rabbi, or the Pope or whatever. So why would you put a picture of somebody's religious person on a gym floor to trample on? And because of the Hollywood movies, things became, the war bonnets or, things like that. And they're not, they're spiritual bonnets. Eagle feathers are the most sacred thing for our people. They're held very high. It's a great honor to even receive one, and you have to earn those, And the face paint sometimes kids will put on at pep assemblies. It's a spiritual thing. Our men and women even, they wear this spiritual paint for spiritual reasons. And even to this day, when our men go into battle, when men went into Vietnam, they painted their faces because if they happened to get killed, the spirits knew them when they crossed over. Because we're given those certain colors, in our names and stuff like that. So there's a lot more to it than just, a school thing, there's a whole spiritual thing behind all that. And we shouldn't misuse people's spirituality, especially in public schools.
It's interesting you brought up, like, both, kind of seeing that imagery, whether it's, kind of like these white students who are wearing the feathers, and this kind of some cultural appropriation that you find, in many places and areas. But what I wanted to ask you is, like, why do you think it is that it is so it seems to people like who are in the pawpaw system or some of these other schools that it's so much more acceptable to dress up and appropriate Native culture and have this team name where, those same people, you probably would not catch them, wearing blackface and having like a team named after African Americans or, something like that. So what is it about, Natives that you think make, these individuals who live in pawpaw kind of see them in a different way, or not see them in a different way, I guess I should say?
I've been trying to figure that one out for years. It's crazy that people can actually attach themselves to something as much as they do, but you see it in the smaller schools mainly that doesn't have much diversity sometimes, and they latch on to these logos like it's the only thing they have left in life for, like they grow up being a Redskin and they graduate and then they stay there and they don't go anywhere, and they raise their families that way, and they think it's like some great honor. I don't know if it's from the romantic paperback books or the movies that has put that image out there that Native Americans were these romantic people and fearless and warriors and all this, but we were really peaceful people. We defended ourselves when we had to. It's kind of interesting that even with our history, they don't teach true history in our schools anymore, unfortunately. And I think that has a lot to do with it, too. People don't realize when they talk to us like we're something in the past. Like, you don't exist. You're just something from the past. And so they don't look at using these imageries and stuff as representing somebody that's really living here, standing here talking to you. I've had people, grown men, get right up in my face and they'll say, well, what's your problem? You should be even thankful that we're honoring you. It's not an honor. Yeah. There's a young boy down there in Pawpaw that dresses himself up with some kind of chicken feather headdress. There's been pictures out there on the internet of him and everything, and they're very proud of it, It's like he's their token Indian or something. But he self-identified as Mexican. But you can't get through to those people. It's like they don't care. They don't want to hear it. It's more or less a possession that they own, and you can't take it away from them. And they don't care if it hurts kids. They don't care. They're like defending their children. Their children have the right, freedom of speech. And the heck with the Indian kids, they don't care if those kids get hurt. It's really a sad situation. I'm sure if we went in there and did something like that, boy, they wouldn't stand for it for a second. And
like
neither would the black
ladies?
race.
No.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, the Mighty Whiteys, that's what they have on their shirts. They got Mighty Redskins, But yeah, so we're hoping on Sunday to get people to come out and support us, walk with us. We're going to be carrying signs, trying to get the true picture across that we're human beings, just like everybody else. We want to protect our children the same as they do. And we don't want our kids called Redskins. We don't want our kids to go to these pep assemblies and games and have to see that. They have the right to go to a football game on Friday night and have fun and be like any other high school kid. And when your kid comes home crying, and they're all upset because of what they saw at school over this, it's not right. It's not fair. It's not right. God, I could just go on and on about things, I've been fighting this issue for a very, very long time, and I don't go into places I'm not asked to come help. And I've heard stories from families all over the state of Michigan, and it's just sad what these kids have had to go through. It's like they don't even have things they can look up to, like a lot of kids of other cultures, unless it's a high school logo, for goodness sakes, that it's supposed to honor them, and they don't feel it. They don't see it. It's degrading for them.
Yeah, and I did want to pivot a little bit and talk about. So this isn't the first time that protests have been made against Paw. I recall quite vividly there were some protests out there last year, and in previous years, though, we got very close to getting the name actually changed. So how do you feel about where this issue is now with Paw versus a year ago? Some things have changed. I know there was a successful campaign with Walmart recently to get the team shirts removed. And in the ensuing time, we've also seen in Kalamazoo the removal of the Fountain of the Pioneers. So I was just curious what your thoughts were on that.
Well, unfortunately, it's not everybody in Paw, so, you don't like to say, group everybody in a group, because there's people out there that get it, they understand, and they want it removed. And there's a lot of people out there that have come to us and said they're afraid to even speak out. They're afraid of what this small group of people down there might do if they found out they thought differently or something, So this issue will split a town in half, It's crazy. The thing about Walmart's was the group that is trying to keep the name, or has kept the name so far, went in and raised a ruckus with Walmart's, and Walmart put the stuff back on their shelf.
Okay.
Well, we won't spend money in your store if you don't do this, type thing.
And what about that
so we're
billboard?
Still working on that one. We plan on keep going. We're probably gonna target all Walmarts eventually. It needs to come off the shelves.
Mm-hmm. So real quick, I'm sorry, Nora, you had a question?
Yeah. Earlier I saw that you had that billboard up exposing the R word as a slur. Is that still been up? Has there been any significant resistance against that?
Oh, it's amazing how a dictionary definition can stir people. Lot of talk. One person down there was very unhappy about it and made a lot of stupid comments, that we should be spending our money in better ways than, like feeding the starving children and stuff like that. But yet they went ahead and put up a billboard for 3 months, and I'm sure that money didn't feed starving children, So So, yeah, it's basically just the Webster Dictionary definition of what the word is, and it makes a very blatant statement. I hope a lot of people see it. I hope it opens a lot of people's eyes, or at least maybe they can go out and do their own research, and realize that it is a derogatory term. It shouldn't be used, especially in our public schools.
Oh, yeah.
They have all these bullying policies at our schools, but unfortunately they don't consider this issue bullying. When another kid verbally attacks or physically even attacks a Native American student, they don't consider it bullying. And I really haven't figured that one out at all, because, for the least little thing now they're screaming bullying, and they say things to us like, oh, tell your kids suck it up. We've all been through it.
Oh, wow.
Don't be such a snowflake or something.
I've had crazy comments, so.
Yeah,
and,
it's funny you mentioned that up, because that Michigan actually is the worst state for school bullying out of all of them. So whatever policies they do have, they're clearly not doing enough, especially if this is happening at such a high rate to Native American students.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So I noticed,
and we have the highest suicide rate. And this is just one of the issues that adds to the pile. You know what I'm saying? That these kids deal with this stuff. And people really need to think about that. I mean, how would they feel if another person from another race was out there with goop and makeup on their faces, and screaming other things like, I don't even want to say some of those things, but you know what I mean? Like, put yourself in our shoes and use another scenario. And would people really put up with that? I don't think so.
Oh, no, you're absolutely right. I have a couple other questions. So,
I'll try.
Pawpaw wasn't the only small town in Southwest Michigan that I've seen Native American folks use as mascots. I don't remember what other town this is. It might have been Dowagiac, Watervliet, Decatur, one of those that had that used that sort of same headdress, Native American imagery on its water tower and on its town sign, but not its school. Is that somewhere where that you can see the movements, this movement specifically in Southwest Michigan targeting next, or would it go towards other schools that continue to use the R word as a mascot?
Well, right now we're trying to remove Redskins because there's 5 schools left. Belding just made a change, I think it was last December. Big major change up there. Wonderful people. The superintendent and the school principal up there was very good leadership there with that issue.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, really, things went fairly well there. People got a lot of education and did their own research too, and made some good choices. And they have changed to the Black Knights, and they're making changes too. And that's the other thing people don't understand. They holler about, oh, the money, the money. Well, a lot of these things are paid by the booster clubs and stuff. I know down in Pawpaw, the Booster Club just raised a huge amount of money that Myers paid for their new billboard with the logo on it, and the Booster Clubs need to realize how bad this is, right? And, when they go get these things, they really need to leave this stuff off. And if corporations are willing to support it, that's not good. Then we need to talk to the corporations too and say, hey, don't put this stuff out there. But anyways, up there they did a really good job. We were very helpful. They actually allowed us to come in and do a presentation to students, and they did a survey prior to it, and then they did another one afterwards. And the change was really miraculous because it was kind of even, like for, against, and didn't know. And then after the presentation, they all were in favor of change. So the kids get it. They're pretty smart. It's like the older generation, and I hate to say it that way, but they're the ones that just won't let go. They got to dig their heels in, and we're not changing. So yeah, we've got a bill out there, SB 487. It's in the Government Operations Committee right now, so people can call up there and say they support it. We're trying to get it on the floor, and that would eliminate 5 schools. That would be wonderful. And then after that, we'll start working with the rest of it. Eventually, we hope to have it all removed.
Yeah, I'll admit I'm a little skeptical that'll get through our state government, but hey, however we get it done, that'll be fantastic. So I have an observation and one more question for you. And the observation is you bring up how we can use and leverage corporations to take these stances on these certain things that might normally not affect them too much, or they'd occasionally do the right thing even if they're a net negative on the majority of people that live in the country and the world. For example, we saw what happened just earlier with Nike and Colin Kaepernick. They can really push for people doing the right thing, but Pawpaw is in the middle of rural America, and they're known for buying at Walmart a lot, so I'd imagine they would have a lot more purchasing power to leverage what Walmart would or wouldn't do. Another characteristic that is common among rural white Americans, they do stay in their town for a long time. Sometimes they never move. So I can
right, exactly.
It makes sense in an effed up way why this mascot is so tied to their identity. Now the question I have, it's unrelated, but for those of us who can't make it to the protest this weekend, how could we act as allies or accomplices to this cause? How can we support this movement, support the protest, provide it with the resources that it needs?
Well, right now, we have a new website out there, nativerightsmi.org. So people can go out there. We're still working on it, but they can donate to help keep the billboard up and different things like that, which would be a great help. Because the more cars that go by, the more people get educated, the better things are. We will be making signs Friday at the Arca Center. I'm not really sure what the time is yet. I don't think they set that. But, we're going to meet at 11 o'clock at the middle school on Johnson Road over by the administration building. We'll be lining up there, and people can park. We'll give directions where they can park when they come. So, if there's anybody that wants to come and walk with us, they're more than welcome to do that. In fact, we encourage it. If they have an organizational flag they'd like to carry, that's great. We just need to get out there and show that this isn't a tiny little issue. It's not a small group of people. There's lots of support for change. And, people need to educate each other also. So we've encouraged the schools and had a lot of success in this so far. If a school that has Native imagery come to your town to play, ask your school board not to announce them by their nicknames. In Pawpaw's case, you wouldn't say, "Here comes the Redskins." You would just say, "Here comes Pawpaw." Just eliminate that. In that way, you're sending a good message out there that you don't tolerate it, that you're not going to accept that in your community. Because that's what they don't seem to get, that when they leave their community, they're carrying this racist stuff out into other people's communities where other Native people might be, and it's offending them, And we've even had protests in Kalamazoo by different groups at schools when Pawpaw came to play, because they don't want it there. They don't want their children seeing that stuff. So we encourage people to talk to their school boards and, work for that change in a good way, so that our children can go to school like anybody else and, get educated, not be in hostile environments, and live a good life. The other thing I want to mention real quick was that I had a really great experience one time. I've had it several times since then, but the first time it happened to me, I had a student that was working actually at Myers up in Mount Pleasant, and she was from a town that I was from, and she thanked me for making the change. She said she didn't realize or understand until she actually left the town and went off to college, and then it was like everything hit her, that because she didn't see that diversity where she came from. So, sometimes it takes a little while for that education to take hold, but eventually they get it.
Well, thank you so much, Linda. And just, before we wrap this up, people who are interested in coming and helping out with the protest, could you give everybody just what's the when, the why, and the what of the protest this weekend?
Well, it's September 9th. Meet at 11 o'clock down by the middle school administration building on Johnson Road. It's to educate people and to support our students so that the derogatory terms and race-based images will be gone so they don't have to deal with that anymore. The parade will start at 1 o'clock. They're going to close off Main Street at 12, so you got to get there before 12. And we will have shuttles running, too. Go out to our Facebook page, our web page, Instagram, Twitter. It's Native Rights MI. And, talk to us, read up on things, educate yourself if you don't already know. And we just hope that you'll join our forces and help support us in this movement.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Linda, for taking the time to come on the show and talk about the protest this weekend. And I'd really recommend everybody, you got some time on Sunday, make some time, go out and help fight with our Native brothers and sisters. So we're going to go to a break. This has been the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo, your only source for political revolution.
Mama P, me go out, Sandy.
What's up, everybody? It's RJD2, and you're listening to 89.1 WIDR FM, Kalamazoo, Michigan.
Support for 89.1 WIDR FM is provided by Modest Mouse, performing at Wings Event Center in Kalamazoo on Tuesday, September 25th at 7:30 p.m. For more information about Modest Mouse in concert at Wings Event Center in Kalamazoo on September 25th, call 269-345-1125 or visit wingseventcenter.com or modestmouse.com.
Stay tuned for Wider's weekly RSO Spotlight on WIDR Kalamazoo.
The Office of LBGT Student Services is a department on Western Michigan's campus that provides events, resources, and space for lesbian, bisexual, gay, transgender, questioning, and ally students. Our upcoming Fall Fab Fest is coming up on Saturday, September 8th from 1 to 4 p.m. in the Adrian Trimp Building. For more information, visit wmich.edu/LBGT.
This has been our weekly RSO Spotlight on WIDR Kalamazoo. For more information on how to spotlight your RSO, head to WIDRFM.org.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. We are back. This is the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo. So we're going to be having another guest on in just a bit, but there has been a lot going on this week. I know I spent most of the first half hour talking about local stuff, but, we live in the world that we live in, and, man, there's been a lot of BS going on all around. That's for sure. So Nora, I know, like we've been sending a few articles back and forth, and one of the ones that really struck me, and you might have heard about it, you might not have, but what's been going on near the border with citizenship? There are legit U.S. citizens who are now having their passports revoked.
Yep.
And what binds them all in common? What ties them together? People who appear Hispanic. Oh, man. And I'm going to read a little bit from this article just to give you some deeper context. It starts from this precedent. They're basically using this precedent from the 90s about how some midwives and physicians in Texas were fraudulently issuing birth certificates for babies actually born in Mexico. In part because of how incredibly difficult it was to identify such cases among the far greater number of babies delivered by the same people in entirely legitimate circumstances. Most litigation over this issue ended in 2009. But then we ended up getting this racist-ass president and his racist-ass administration, and kind of similar to, it reminds me almost of how they go after people for, voter fraud, even though it's 0.005% of votes, or I think you could literally were able to count the number of people who committed voter fraud in the last election on two hands. 4 hands about. I think it was like 15 or 16 people. So how ridiculous is this? Well, let's look at an example here. So what this basically means is that an actual U.S. citizen suddenly has to bear the burden of proving their legitimacy under pain of losing their passports or facing deportation. Now, this particular case, I couldn't believe how ridiculous this was. I just have to read it. This guy, he's a military veteran, a former Border Patrol agent, used to be part of the Border Patrol, and he's filling out like this routine passport renewal. And this is what he said to the reporter for this article. I said he received a letter from the State Department telling him it wasn't convinced that he was a U.S. citizen. He requested a range of obscure documents, evidence of the mother's prenatal care, his baptismal certificate, rental agreements from when he was a baby. He managed to find some of those documents, but weeks later received another denial. In a letter, the government said the information did not establish your birth in the United States. Oh, man.
So this guy went from being a veteran to a border guard to a prison guard. Like, he's, on paper, he's what, the Trumpites would really like, but they're going to kick him out anyways because he's brown and he was born too close to the border. Now, a lot of these that I've noticed from the article, they mentioned specifically has happened a lot for births that are close to the U.S.-Mexico border, especially the one among Texas. And you hear a lot about these awful immigration stuff happening in Texas in particular because it's got the largest border between U.S. and Mexico, and Texas, even aside from that, it's a very big state where people can get rounded up. In fact, recently an ICE raid picked up 160 people and had them kidnapped. Now, taking actual citizens and I think it shows that this was never about going after, quote, the bad ones or the people who are in here illegally. Like, that's not what this is. Like, if this doesn't prove it, then I don't know what will. And it's not like this is not the only time we've seen this administration going after people's passports like this. We've seen this with trans activists having their passports either denied for renewal or just revoked or seen as not legitimate, when that's usually how people would get their gender marker changed. So be careful with your passport, folks, and consider getting an enhanced license or state ID if you need to leave the country but not the continent, because that might be enough for you. But the fact that they would revoke the thing that would allow us to re-enter the country sends a disturbing message.
Yeah, and the two takeaways that I'm seeing a lot in national media, I just wanted to hit on them real quick, is one, the draconian and fascist nature of this should not be understated. I was seeing a lot of side-by-side comparison of, Germany doing this, the exact same thing to both Jews and certain other ethnic groups, stripping them of their citizenship. And
Germany started with deportations. They didn't go right to killing people.
That's correct. And there's that, and there's also the fact that particularly in Texas, and we're already starting to see it, especially this fear of the blue wave or the progressive wave or whatever. The Republican state legislatures and Republican governance in general is trying to do everything they can to suppress the vote leading up to this election. And when you're targeting U.S. citizens who will likely be voting against these xenophobic anti-immigrant politicians, trying to disenfranchise them and minimize their numbers would make a lot of sense if you were on the opposite side of them politically. So that is a really terrifying and rather horrific story, and it's something that we need to keep an eye on just as much as when it really exploded that they were separating families. This always seems to be the pattern with the Trump administration. They'll do something terrible, people will notice it, it'll spark a national outrage, they'll be quiet for a little bit, and then they'll just come back and do something just as bad or even worse.
Yeah, like sometimes they'll deny it, or they'll have all these, or different, talking heads, the administration will have all these contradictory statements about who did what. And that's just kind of the game they're playing. They're just going to continue to push through these horrible policies one after another that are hard to keep track of, and will just strangle marginalized communities as much as they can to, please the fascists that voted them in.
Mm-hmm.
That's what's going to happen. And a couple months ago, I said I recommended people to start getting their passports quick. I'm going to reiterate that. Try to get your passports, like, in case you need to get out of here, and just so you can have a passport before they make it impossible. Get your passport stuff right now.
Get it. It's very important.
Oh, also, if you're trans, maybe change your gender marker through not the passport system. If you can.
Yeah, that's been a problem too. I think we were talking about that a couple weeks ago. They've been targeting trans folks as well. So, yeah, like I said, Nora, get your passport. Also wanted to, kind of a very different topic here, but important because it affects us. It's at the state level. I want to talk about the Michigan ordered closure of all these marijuana dispensaries. And I think it was very interesting where this was mostly concentrated. This is from the Associated Press, but on Thursday, Michigan regulators said that they ordered the closure of 210 medical marijuana businesses over a 2-week period, largely because their owners failed to apply for a state license by a mid-February deadline or did not receive authorization from their municipalities. So this article is actually from back in March, but this just went across the governor's desk, I believe, earlier this week. And I believe he voted to go forward with it. Is that correct, Nora?
I have not been able to check.
Yeah. But most of the shops, though, about 150 of 8 of them are in Detroit. They also cited 8 in Lansing, 7 in Flint, 5 in Gaylord, and then 3 each in Ann Arbor and Battle Creek. And, what strikes me is like, one, there's a lot of dispensaries in Ann Arbor.
So, and it is worth mentioning there's one in Portage and there's one in Bangor now. And there's... I still don't think there's any in Kent County, last I heard. Their local government hasn't exactly been friendly to that.
Yeah. So why Detroit in particular is being so heavily targeted? So you can tell by our sarcastic that we're thinking there's probably some kind of agenda to this. And one of the critiques that we've consistently made about our road to legalization, which we could likely be at the end of come November.
For Michigan, that is.
Yeah. Is that conservatives in the legislature, it seems like they've kind of surrendered to the fact that legalization is going to happen. So they've been kind of trying to plant the seeds, till the garden for the benefit of major corporations.
That's a good metaphor.
And agricultural conglomerates. So, these 158 shops that are ostensibly providing medical marijuana, what are they going to be replaced with when weed is legal? What happens when that community infrastructure that's already in place is completely dismantled, and come November, you basically have an open market? Well, it basically would make, correct me if I'm wrong, Nora, but it would basically just give, the wealthy investors, and we've talked about this on the show before, not only like Monsanto Bayer, but also like wealthy foreign investors have come in. Even here in the north side, there was I think there's some wealthy investors from the United Arab Emirates who were trying to build a dispensary on the north side when there are a lot of people in that underground business on the north side who should get first dibs to build a dispensary in the neighborhood. But, of course, there are certain financial, what's the word I'm looking for?
Barriers?
Barriers.
Yeah,
financial barriers to getting these kind of businesses started. So, I mean, it reminds me of a lot of the other critiques with gentrification in Detroit, that these large multinational corporations are getting kind of first bid to reshape Detroit how they want. And it seems like they're going to be trying to do that with marijuana in a very big way.
It's not just that. I think by trying to close down all these dispensaries, especially in Detroit, it's going to feed into mass incarceration, because if people can't get the medicine they need legally and they need the medicine, then they'll resort to certain means. And if they get pulled over at the wrong time, then they're screwed. And then that just feeds into more of the for-profit prison machine. Worth mentioning that Wayne County, where Detroit is, I'm pretty sure that their county jail still has a contract with ICE, unless something changed recently.
Kent County, you said?
Wayne County.
Oh, Wayne County, yeah. Mm-hmm. I've not heard anything different from them, so yeah, I believe that is accurate. So, okay. Well, is there anything else you want to talk about real quick before we go to break?
Let's go to break.
Okay. This is the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo, your only source for political revolution. When we get back, we'll be joined by a special guest to discuss political strategy and the progressive movement. Stay tuned.
WIDR would like to remind you to please drive safely. Drunk driving not only puts your life in danger, but the lives of others as well. If you find yourself stranded somewhere, consider calling Drive Safe Kalamazoo, phoning a friend, or having an Uber pick you up. Thank you for listening.
WIDR. Wider on the go.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are back. This is the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo. So we are now joined by a very special guest. It's a friend of mine I've known from the fiery kernels of the Bernie Sanders election up all the way through right now. And I described you earlier, Don, as perhaps one of the most influential strategists in the Dem Enter movement that people have generally never heard of. Why don't we go ahead and just start? I wanted to, if there's anything you can add to that introduction, please do. And then just talk about a little bit about what you were up to earlier today. And I know you're in the midst of some travels at the moment. And we'll kind of dig into that a little bit more deeply. But first, just, tell the folks, what you're, kind of what you're all about and where you're coming from.
Oh, wow. So I'm coming from Los Angeles. No, sorry, that's not the right answer. Let's see. I am, a political strategist. I volunteer my time for the Bernie Sanders movement. Right now, we're fighting big money, and we're fighting corporate interests that have unlimited resources. And so I do a lot of traveling around and communicating with people, both online and in person, to try and figure out where they might be stuck or where we can help and where we can use our various assets, a little bit more effectively. So a lot of the work's been, recently my big three things that I'm working on was I spent a year working on trying to figure out how to get Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez elected from the outside of her campaign. I did work with her a little bit, and we got a good plan going back in March. And then the other one was Andrew Gillum. I spent a lot of time in Florida last year working on that and trying to figure out how to get people of color involved with the process. It really comes down to better representation. And the last thing I've been working on real hard is the superdelegate reform that just passed this last week or week before in Chicago. That was a 2.5-year project, and a lot of people were involved in that. So that was a real labor of love. So right now, I am traveling the country. I was just in, Minnesota, but I was in Michigan today. And so today we were talking about corruption in the Illinois State Party and the Speaker of the House from a gentleman named Madigan, and how that has been affecting grassroots volunteers on the ground. Actually, they completely destroyed a couple of people's lives. And just a few minutes ago, I was meeting with a gentleman named, I'm hopefully going to get his name right, Jedediah Brown, who is, call him a leader in his community. But he's been a long-time activist, and he runs a national organization that I need to, it's called Justice. And so, it's national of the country, and he's trying to figure out how to both run for an alderman race, which is like city council essentially, but a little more complicated, and how we can elevate the different communities to keep them involved and give them something to be inspired by.
Oh yeah, that's great. And I think let's start with the superdelegate stuff, because I know we've been keeping up with it on the show a bit. I know you've really been in the guts of that thing. You've actually had a lot of conversations with higher level people, including Tom Perez. So just if you could start, explain what the implications would be for future elections, where it what this means as far as superdelegates and their control over the process. And also, maybe you could explain, I know one thing that I've seen from a lot of detractors was a concern about the party chair having some added language about them having power over determining who is and isn't a Democrat and able to run. And I know that I think you might have had a take on that. I read a little while ago, but if maybe you could talk a little bit about that for the folks at home.
Sure. We're going to separate these into two questions, really. So you have one about the superdelegate reform, and a separate one that is about the pledge to be a Democrat, which the language that people are nervous about is a bona fide Democrat and what that means. Let's talk about that real fast. So this is a slightly simpler issue. So in 2015, Bernie Sanders signed a document when he was going to run in the Democratic Party, because he holds a position as an independent. And he signs a document about running as a Democrat and that he would endorse the eventual nominee. And that, that was basically, and there's also this issue of this joint fundraising agreement, but that was a separate document. So he signed these two documents. One is I am a bona fide Democrat and I will support the eventual nominee, which is, I hate that language so much because could that be more loaded? And then this is the old document, by the way, 2015. And in the other one, joint fundraising agreement that they would do fundraising, which a lot of people were upset about in 2016, when if you didn't sign up to the right, fundraising page, then you ended up donating to half to the DNC that went to the eventual candidate and half to the Bernie Sanders campaign. So people got really upset about that. Now, when they went into the rules and bylaws, so this is in the convention rules, and they added this because we have never had a pathway for an independent to run for president on the Democratic ticket before now. Before Bernie, this is just another way that Bernie is transforming the party. Because when he signed that document saying he would, pledge his support to the eventual nominee, he sacrificed his First Amendment rights. And so during the rules and bylaws, here's what I want to say about these reforms. People want to go on about how the DNC is doing all this bad stuff. And some of us are saying, no, it's not like that, it's not like that. But it doesn't mean that some people didn't try. Like, there was absolutely a move to try to use this to lock Bernie out of the party. I'm not going to try to look anyone in the face and say that is true. They tried to add a time limit stipulation that would have limited how long you would have had to be a Democrat before you could say you were a Democrat. So that got struck specifically on the language that they didn't want to cut independents from running in the party. So there's really something to say about that alone is a good sign that this isn't happening. I have to pay a toll about that. So effectively, this was clearly made to. Thank you. This was clearly made to make sure that an independent could run under some very basic rules. Sorry about that little interruption. Apparently, driving and talking is an issue. So,
that's pretty normal for Michigan.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. So basically, this was specifically created to allow someone to run. Now, see, the thing is that a lot of people don't recognize that in 2016 or 2015, one of the main establishment arguments against Bernie being the nominee was that he would do what he does in Vermont, which is he would win the nomination and strike the nomination to run as an independent. Now, see, if someone did that with the Democratic Party, we would lose ballot access, potentially. So no one wants to risk making someone the nominee so that they can turn down the party endorsement, run as an independent, and that would collapse the Democratic Party. And this is why independents have been kept out of the process to some degree. So now that we have this rule change saying, I will run as an independent, I will run as a Democrat, maintain the Democratic nominee status, and that's basically what the pledge says. Now, the bona fide Democrat thing is a little tricky, and there was a gentleman named Gary, shout out to Gary Winston-Apple, he's a Missouri DNC member and a Bernie Crat, and he was fighting really hard to change the language around bona fide Democrats. He knew people would be upset by it. But apparently, and I need to double check this is what I've been told, this is my understanding, I've heard this directly from the Vermont State Party chair, okay? Yeah, we're friends, and I absolutely told this verbatim, that the bona fide Democrat is determined with conversation between the state party chair and the DNC chair. The state party chair, because of state rights being as the priority in the charter, they override the DNC chair. Now, the thing about the DNC chair having final say is so that it can't be challenged by the DNC body or in a committee like a rules committee or credentials committee. They can't go and challenge it because the DNC chair has final say on it.
Wow, interesting.
So people are seeing this as like, so if we had a corrupt tyrant DNC chair, then we wouldn't be able to fix this. But I'm like, we just had a corrupt tyrant DNC chair, and this person let Bernie.
Yeah. Oh no, that's definitely right. Actually, Nora, I wanted to make sure that I'm not the one just asking all the questions. Were you interested in throwing some stuff out there? Or?
Yeah, I do have a question. One thing I've noticed with the progressive Dem Enter movement is that it has not been able to successfully primary anybody, incumbent or otherwise, as a progressive to get into the U.S. Senate. Why do you think that is? Do you think it's too big of a money or institutional barrier, or do you think there's other factors at play here?
That's a really, really good question. So in 2016, we discovered that we could do something and really change stuff. In 2017, we won state house races in all over the country because those were the races. We won a lot of municipal in like Pennsylvania and other places very successfully. So that was a big move, but none of that stuff was federal. This year, I sort of promised everyone that we would get one person through Congress. So that person for me was Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. And since we've gotten 3 more people through. We've got Rashida, who's last name I can't remember, a French, wonderful, wonderful woman, state rep already. Ilhan Omar, who I just met the other day, who's just an amazing public speaker. And we had this other win last night of this woman who's a complete shocker. I have not committed her name to memory yet. So I think that when these wins, it's like a growing movement. And it's true, we have had Senate campaigns that have been pretty strong. But the problem is that there's just not a lot of distrust against senators, generally speaking. So it's harder to make the argument for representation and all this other stuff that we work on with people of color running for office in these targeted demographics. It's super easy to make the argument, these people are better representation, these are the people we should go with. Do you know what I'm saying? It's a little bit harder to make this argument at statewide level because the demographic is not as clear that a person of color is necessarily represents the majority. And so that's changing. In some communities, that's true, but those communities are only now waking up. So, and making, because a lot of these people feel like, and I tell people, we're not trying to fix 2016 right now, we're really trying to fix 2000. So all these people lost faith in the process, right?
Yep, that's right. And, we always hammer ourselves that, the unlocking people who are too cynical to vote, getting them to actually have faith in a campaign is far more effective than trying to get somebody from this mythical center that they always talk about.
Right, absolutely. Because they seem to think that polling these Republican votes is going to be successful, but the Republicans, the hard right, which we got to stop calling them the right, because it's giving them credibility they don't deserve, is making it impossible to move these people to the center, which I think is part of what the Tea Party movement was about. It was about stopping us from being able to pull into that center party, that center move, which is where you get into the whole, like, are we fighting parties? Are we fighting corporations? And at what point are these consultants and strategists people are using also the same consultants and strategists that the corporations are using? And so there's this overlap going on where the messaging isn't really about winning elections so much as it is about maintaining corporate control.
No.
So,
very true.
So, yeah, exactly. So when you talk about why haven't we won statewide yet, I think the best example right now is John Fetterman in Pennsylvania. John Fetterman won the lieutenant governorship, and even though it's not a Senate race, it's our first statewide win anywhere. So I think that winning a Senate race in the next two, I think when we get a good presidential bump, I think we should be able to take a Senate race.
Yeah, that is true. 2020 is going to be a very interesting looking battlefield, to say the least. Now, this is a very broad strokes question, and, particularly since I know, like, you've been really on the ground working with a lot of grassroots folks in, like, campaigns on their own local issues, but just, like, from where you're standing, what have these winning campaigns been doing right? And how do you feel, like, are there things in common that's stopping certain progressive, that's making certain progressive campaigns fall short? What kind of patterns are you seeing in these 2 years since the Bernie campaign?
Oh, that's super easy, and I don't want to forget we still need to discuss the superdelegate thing. Basically, negative campaigning. Negative campaigning is really the thing that I see really taking people down. It's really easy for someone with a lot of money to come against somebody without any money and make you feel bitter and make you feel sour to the experience. And then when you're like that, like grassroots progressives are totally dependent on being able to build community support. And every time you're being negative to a group of people who already feel disillusioned about the system, they just see the system winning again. And so they have to be witnessed. These people are like leaders. So they have to be overcoming these trials and tribulations, being examples for the people in their community so that they can then do it themselves. And right now, I feel like that's like the biggest thing. Like when someone loses their campaign, handling it gracefully, or even winning their campaign, handling it gracefully is so important for maintaining support. When we talk about a movement, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. So we have to pace ourselves, and we can't expect to win everything first time, and we can't expect everything to be fair. One really, really dirty tactic that I've seen only in the past couple of weeks, this appears to be coming directly from the DCCC, which is the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee. Just for all your listeners, the DCCC is basically Congress coming together and picking who has enough money to be in Congress with them. Mm-hmm. It's all based on which consultants you use, strategists, and they're notorious for lack of a better word, screwing over activists at the ground level. They're also really big on sending people out of districts, so you can't build ground support on a paid gig. So if you get a paid job canvassing for a campaign, there's no way it's going to be in your district. They're always going to send you out of your district. And that makes you unable to ever be a challenger. So what I'm seeing them do, though, right now, is they're actually sending out negative campaign materials from secret PACs on behalf of their opponents.
On behalf of their opponent? Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Is it maybe learning a lesson from Texas, or?
Yeah, right. What's happening with the Zodiac killer? No. Sorry.
Well, actually, I was referring to the congressional candidate down there who basically had some dirt spilled by the DCCC themselves. I'm forgetting her name.
Right.
Although that is shaping up to be a very interesting race, Beto and Mr. Potential Zodiac Killer down there.
Mr. The unconfirmed. No, he's confirmed. No, it's a joke. It's a joke, or is it? So, we're actually pretty excited with the Beto Award race because Beto shows the F up, and that apparently is going to be his campaign slogan. Thank you, Mr. Cruz. But So, getting back real fast to the superdelegate reform, I really want to explain this to people because there is stuff we have to do. There is stuff that people have to pay attention to. It's really normal when you're, in these reforms and you see people doing the work and you go, great, they did it, it's done. However, in this environment, this reform is inside of the convention rules. And unlike a charter amendment, convention rules can get addressed a bunch of different ways. Mostly when they're preparing the charter, when they're preparing the convention rules like they did just now, right? It's in the sequence of timing, and it's usually a rubber stamp. They change the rules around, so it works better. And this one had a major shift. Well, basically what they did was, instead of a charter amendment, we'll get to why the charter amendment is important in a second. They basically removed superdelegates. Okay, so first off, for all your viewers, our listeners, superdelegates is a concept about they are both unpledged delegates and automatic delegates at the same time. So when you're unpledged on the first round of voting, that means that your vote is equal to a delegate that you get from the popular vote during the primary. So a delegate can represent hundreds, even thousands of people. So these people had as much weight as, let's say, Delaware, we got one Bernie Sanders delegate, one single one. And they had like 4 superdelegates. So the superdelegates outweighed completely the availability of pledged delegates. And this has never really been a problem before now because they tried to use it to leverage, as we all saw, the media and the different campaigns leverage these numbers in order to suppress other campaigns. And the problem with that is not about Bernie Sanders got screwed. That's not the bad part. The bad part is that it's bad for party growth, and ultimately it's because of that suppression that we lost in November. Because statistically, there's no question that people just didn't show up to vote. Mm-hmm. So originally, this started with a 2/3 removal proposed. Well, first it started with a full removal proposed by Maine. And the woman out of Maine, her name is Diane Russell. She ran for governor. She's also the person who passed ranked choice voting there, or she didn't pass it, but she got it through the legislature and then fought the different types of appeals they had. And she lost her governor's race, but passed ranked choice voting, which was super cool. That's the price right there.
Where was that, Don? I'm sorry, Nora.
In Maine. Diane Russell in Maine. Yeah. And so we took that during the convention process, and we took that to 6 or 7 other conventions that were happening of people that were writing resolutions. I think Oregon passed one, Washington passed, a bunch of other states passed them, and that got brought to the national team. Now, they did say in the the famous WikiLeaks emails that this was a bone they tossed us. But for me, I was like, you give me anything and I will turn it into a body. And so, they gave us this bone, and then they started something called the Union Reform Commission. The Union Reform Commission was these two groups of Sanders and Hillary representatives that were going to come together over the next couple of months to figure out the issues. Now, everyone thought Hillary was going to win when they said all this stuff. They didn't think it really mattered. And Hillary didn't win, and we made this stuff really matter. Like all the grassroots activists on the country, I went to all the DNC meetings, and even when I'm the only person there representing us, on this level, there are plenty of people in the Union Reform Commission that aren't really grassroots at that point. There are tons of people behind me that I crowdsource and do all my stuff through donations that are getting me there, and all those people really deserve some credit. Without them, none of this would be possible. So it's about coming together to make something really great happen. So I went to these DNC meetings and drove this issue really hard that we needed 2/3 removal. But the problem with the 2/3 removal is that it requires a charter amendment. We can't do a charter amendment. We can only pass convention rules. So in the convention rules, the third way, I don't know if you guys are familiar with it, the New Democrats are a group inside of the Democratic Party. They're also called the Third Way. They were started by Elaine Carmack and a couple other people.
Blue Dog Democrats with a new coat of paint, basically? Yeah.
No. The Blue Dogs are a new Democrats with a new coat of paint. Yeah. Like these guys have been around forever, and all the things you don't like about the DNC, these guys really have been behind. Mm-hmm. A gentleman named David McDonald out of Washington, and now that they live stream the Rules and Bylaws meetings, you can just see how they've been, working things for years and years and years. And keep in mind, these are the same people that gave us 2 terms of Bush when everyone thought it was impossible. So there's no reason that we should sit down and expect them to lead us the right direction when we're facing an incumbent presidency. There's just no way around it. So they're inevitably going to make bad decisions because it's the same people that made the same decisions trying to make the same decisions again. So that's why I'm, put so much of my time and effort about making personal connections with as many people as I could along this route to really drive the issue that if we don't honor the 2/3 removal in some way, like we put forward as a resolution at the convention, then no one's ever going to believe our party again. So who's going to believe these people? So I really drove this issue, and then the New Democrats, after Rules and Bylaws, came up with this tricky plan. First, Ken Martin, who's the ASPC chair, which is he's the chair of chairs, the chairman of all the state party chairs. He came up with this plan to move them all to the second ballot because it's something we could do. Very smart, actually, because a lot of people are like, well, they still have influence. I'm like, yeah, of course they do. They're going to have influence just party leadership, too. So if we don't have automatic delegates to the convention can't actually happen. Rules of bylaws from convention can't happen because these are all in the charter. So until we can change the charter, we have to leave it this way, and just we don't have the vote. So I'm sorry if I'm going a little. This is a very insider baseball bit. So short version of this is hard. We drove the issue. The New Democrats came up with this plan to move everyone to the second ballot. Instead of 2/3, didn't figure out who the 2/3 would be. So let's move everyone. And I went, okay, yeah, let's do that.
All right. I think, Don, we've probably got time for maybe like 1 or 2 more questions, just kind of leave off. So, Nora, I'm going to you go ahead and give one question. I'll give one last one to top out.
Being on the inside like this and seeing that superdelegates only really have this kind of power to sway a presidential primary in the second ballot, do you think that there's that the DNC or the powers that be within the Democratic establishment will try to push for a second ballot in this next primary? Or how do you think that'll happen?
I think it's really important that everyone stay involved. Number one, at the convention, when it starts, they can rewrite the convention rules again and switch them around. So we have to stay on top of them and make sure they don't do that. Number two, generally speaking, the presidential race narrows down to 2 people pretty quickly. So there's always a potential of superdelegates coming and swaying the race. So the difference being this time, and this will be a short answer, is that if we looked at last presidential election, and it's like 2014 right now, Hillary Clinton's campaign was already stuffing all the superdelegate coffers with money. All their re-election campaigns were getting crammed with cash. That is not happening right now. There's no one going out and buying up super Hellies. So also there's a big push for, and we need to push this at your state level, is your state party leadership staying neutral through the primary process as long as they can, at least for presentation purposes. Because some of them are bundlers, we need fundraising, it's hard to fight that. And we did rule that not only can we not enforce standards to endorse the candidate, we also can't stop the super Hellies from endorsing because of First Amendment. So all we can do is be really active right now and get really involved with your local politics and start building that network for whoever our progressive candidate is going to be. I mean, we started the Bernie Sanders campaign like at Iowa, really. I mean, plenty of people were involved early. If we get started now, 2 years early, I think that whoever we put up is going to be unstoppable.
Okay, thank you so much, Don. And one last question before we wrap up the show. Playing devil's advocate real quick. So, a lot of people think this has been attempted before, reforming the Democratic Party, and that it may not necessarily, verbal diarrhea here. So citing, say, the examples of, Jesse Jackson's Rainbow Coalition, or what Howard Dean tried to do with Democracy for America, which was their attempts to try to pull the Democratic Party to the left. What is different about this time around that makes it both different and, I'm sure from your point of view, more effective and attainable?
Well, what you just said is that, what you just pointed out is its own problem, right? It's all these people organizing outside of the party structure. And that's an attempt to control fundraising. They want to control where the dollar's being spent, and they want to put it into their own whatever things they're trying to manage. The difference is this time is we're organizing directly inside the Democratic Party. Things like precinct commanders, or precinct captains, and even, executive board members of county chairs are at all-time low. I think in 2016, the biggest thing is that all these people were holding ground for Hillary Clinton to get elected, and they all vacated their positions. So right now, there's more room for young people to get involved and have a say in their party than ever before. And that's why some state central committees are pushing so hard to push people out. So that's some pushback everyone's going to be aware of. But, I think the difference is that we're organizing inside the party instead of outside the party, and that turns directly into say and control because it puts us at the table. And as they say, you're not at the table, you're on the menu. So I think all those groups were on the menu, not at the table.
All right, Don. Well, thank you so much for joining us on the program, and I guess we'll be seeing you later on this evening. But I'm sure we could probably talk about this stuff for hours, and I'm sure we will. But hopefully, maybe we can have you on the show again sometime and really go into the weeds on some more of these topics.
Anytime, I'd be happy to do it. I'm on the road till November.
All right. Well, I want to thank y'all for listening. This has been the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo. As always, keep your dial locked to wider. We're here every Wednesday from 5 to 7. We upload all of our episodes on the YouTube for your listening pleasure. And until next time, keep on fighting for that revolution solution.